Okay guys, I really hope this works out. This is my first time not using ScreenFlow. I am giving Voila a chance. It's a new screen capture program that I've come across down here, as you can see. Voila. It's really spelled, it's not really spelled voila. It's spelled voila or something, but it's French, so it's voila. And it's a really, really great screen capture program, but it's lacking a few things that ScreenFlow has, such as a great editor and being able to capture your cam at the same time you record your desktop. Okay, but other than that, it's got some really great features that I would love to see added to ScreenFlow. Its encoding is wonderful, and its UI is absolutely beautiful, and it's so easy to keep things organized. So I figured, I'm going to give it a shot. Why not? I usually record myself on camera when I'm talking, but there may be the occasional time when I don't, or the app may get that feature in the future, or, so this is just a test. So don't start thinking every video that I make isn't going to have me on cam. I'm not going to start not showing myself, but I wanted to give this new Voila app a try and see the quality of the encode and just see how it does and all that good stuff. So we'll see. So this is just a test if you're wondering. And of course this video has been in the works for a long time. I just haven't had time to do it here lately. And this is regarding Paul Thurrott's iTunes 10 article. Now sit back, grab something to drink and some popcorn, because this may take a few minutes to go through. And I know you can't see me right now, but I'm in this terrible habit. I'm looking at the iSight camera and I'm talking to the camera like it's filming me, and I can't get out of that habit. So I'm sitting here waving my hands around, talking to the camera like you guys can actually see my dumb ass, and you can't. So if it sounds like I'm moving around, it's because I am, So let's go ahead and get into this, because I have a feeling it's going to take a few minutes as it is. So he begins his article by saying, "It's gotten to the point where iTunes is simply something that we, as Windows users, have learned to live with. It's a bloated, poorly written, poor-performing pig of a program." Now I want to stop him right there. I don't know if he's got any programming skill. I don't know if he's got a history, a past of coding, if he worked on the iTunes code, but I have no idea what position he comes from to be able to say that it's a bloated, poorly written piece of software. Has he ever even seen the code? Because when I think of bloat, I think of Windows. I think when I go out and buy an HP computer and I turn it on for the first time, I have all this HP bullshit on the desktop. I have Norton shit on the desktop that I have to go through and uninstall. That's bloatware. And I don't know what you're talking about when you say iTunes is bloated. What do you mean by that? Do you mean you can fire up iTunes and look in the activity monitor or the task monitor and see 2 or 3 things related to iTunes running? Is that why you think it's bloated? Because it's running an iTunes helper in the background? So please explain to me by what you mean by iTunes being bloated, because I have to totally and utterly 100% disagree with you on that. I don't think it's bloated. I don't think it's slow, and I don't think it's poor performing. It's snappy whenever I ask it to move. As you can see, I have my iTunes open. I don't understand when I go to movies, it clicks to movies. When I go to TV shows, it clicks to TV shows. And it does it at a fairly high rate of speed when you consider how many people are accessing iTunes at any minute of the day. When I click to music, it automatically goes to music. When I scroll, you can see it scrolls. And the album art on the left, even almost 100%, keeps up with how fast I'm scrolling, except for the ones that don't have any album art. As you can see, there's no lag, no jitter, no nothing. I can go to cover flow, and as you can see, there's no lag, no jitter. I really don't know or understand, because maybe it's a Windows thing, and to say that it's just a Windows thing, then I have to blame Windows more than iTunes. Okay, I'm just sorry. Windows is a terrible platform, and if iTunes works great on most other things except the Windows platform, it's easier for me to believe that it's Windows that makes the iTunes so terrible than it is for me to believe that Apple can't write a good application for Windows. That's bullshit. They've proved that they can. They've released Windows apps in the past. And I don't think there is some deep, high-level conspiracy at Apple. Let's make iTunes bad on Windows PC so it performs bad. So, that's crazy. What's easiest for me to believe is that Windows is just a shitty platform. They've ported iTunes over, just like all the PC users used to do the Mac games. They used to port the PC games over to Mac, and they would always be a little less performing, always be a little slower, always be a little shittier. And that's what you guys got on the Windows PC. You got a port, basically. And maybe it does perform a little laggy compared to the native Mac version. When I say native, I mean original. So, maybe you could solve all your problems by buying a Mac. I mean, yeah, you can blame Apple, but I think there's only so much Apple can do to make an application that does what iTunes does so smooth on Windows. I think there's only so much they can do, okay? And cover flow is great. You can make it big or small, but I use the new view. As you can see, it lays out all of my albums here for me. Super easy. I love this new view. It's not much has changed from the last view like this, but I really like how all my album art is laid out there now. And I can at a glance see what's going on and most of the music related to it. I don't know what people talk about when they say they don't like this new view. I really like this new view. But mainly sticking to the performance aspect of it right now. He said it was bloated, and I'm sorry, I can go to the iTunes store, boom, I'm right there. Podcast, music, it don't matter, boom, it comes up in a matter of seconds. And as you see, it's accessing the iTunes store. This is on the internet end. This is not on the application itself. If it takes it a little time for it to access the iTunes store, if it seems slow, then maybe they're having a busy day, or maybe your internet connection's being a little slow for some reason. I don't know. But iTunes is anything but slow, and I'm proving it to you right now, because it is more than responsive. If I go to my TV shows, let's go back to TV shows here, you can see that it's look how fast it is. The album art fills in almost as fast as I can scroll. I don't understand what people say when it's slow. It seems like to me it's just slow for the Windows users. And you know what? Too bad, so sad. I can't help you. Because we complained and complained and complained about Windows for years and years and years, and people said too fucking bad. So you know what? If iTunes don't perform as well on Windows as it does on Mac, too fucking bad. You have several choices, and I will get to that. So let's go on with this article. Apple's digital media solution, while ubiquitous, are also curiously unsophisticated. Unsophisticated, he says. Unsophisticated, excuse me. It'd help if I could talk, wouldn't it? Unsophisticated as compared to what, Paul? As compared to what? iTunes is the most advanced, sophisticated piece of digital media software that manages your movies, your TV shows, your music, your podcast, and even being a social network now. There is not a more quote-unquote sophisticated application that does what iTunes does. Are you telling me Amazon is more sophisticated? Bullshit. The only way to access Amazon is through the fucking web. At least iTunes has an application that I can fire up on my own, on its own behalf, and it's sandboxed. I don't have to make my purchases via the web like I do on Amazon MP3 store. You know, and there are solutions to that too, and we'll get to that. Okay, let's see what he says. While ubiquitous, they're curiously unsophisticated. There's no wireless sync. Now that I'll agree with. Apple should get its shit together with the wireless syncing. But what people fail to understand is it's a little bit more complicated to wireless sync with Apple and iTunes than it is some other application. Because you got to think, everybody wants to blame Apple for a lot of this stuff, but a lot of it is the content companies. The content owners and the content creators don't want Apple to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so that when it says there's no wireless sync, there's a lot to work out when you got to sync rented movies between 3 or 4 devices that somebody owns. If you own 2 iPods and an iPad, you know, you got to work out all that syncing. The computer has to know what you've rented, what you've bought, what's yours, distinguish it from the other 5 registered computers. I mean, there's a lot to wireless syncing when it comes to iTunes. If you really get down and think about it, and you bring the content creators into the picture, you'll understand why wireless syncing is taking so long. Okay, but then he goes on to say, there's no way to simply manage your Apple device from the cloud. No, if you want to use any iDevice, you need to use iTunes. And that's not true at all. There is an application out there called Double Twist that you can almost use absolutely any MP3 player you want. And instead of the iTunes store, it accesses the Amazon MP3 store. So, why are you using iTunes again when there are viable alternatives out there? Is it just because you're a fucking idiot? If you're this unhappy with an application, then you seek out viable alternatives. But obviously you can't find any viable alternatives. And because you can't find any viable alternatives, it makes your unsophisticated remark pointless and nil. So let me go on. What we get in iTunes 10 is more of the same. You mean like they went from... You mean like Vista and Windows 7? More of the same? Instead of rewriting iTunes from scratch, as is oh so necessary, you mean like how Windows or Microsoft didn't write Vista over from scratch, which was oh so necessary. Instead, they took the code they had, patched it up, and made Windows 7. You know, Paul, practice what you fucking preach, you hypocrite. So let's go on. Instead of rewriting iTunes from scratch, as is oh so necessary, Apple has instead piled more junk on the teetering foundation that is iTunes for Windows and covered it all up with a small spit shine to the UI. It sounds like to me he's describing Windows 7 from Windows Vista. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm sorry, I know Windows 7 is markedly improved over Vista, but I don't believe it's that much of a different animal. I really don't. It's what the Microsoft Office team used to call putting lipstick on a pig. Just some cursory and unnecessary UI changes so you can tell at a glance which version it is. Exactly. When a piece of software has become ubiquitous over the last decade, everybody knows it, everybody recognizes it. It could be detrimental to the application if they change it much. It's the whole problem with Windows. Everybody says, why don't they just rewrite Windows from scratch? Why don't they just rewrite Windows? And you know what I hear Microsoft apologists say like you, Paul? They say, well, we need to worry about compatibility. What? Just fucking scrap it, and if the people want compatibility, they'll upgrade and buy the new stuff like Apple does. When they switched to Intel, they said, sorry, that's it. And they wasn't worried about compatibility. But you don't go into an application that's a decade old, as popular as iTunes, and just start changing things when it's what people know. You should understand this coming from a Windows background, because people have complained about the Windows UI and the Windows code and everything for the last 10 years. And Microsoft still refuses to give us a total operating system rewrite. Okay? They won't do it. So, complaining that why don't iTunes give us a rewrite, that's kind of hypocritical, and it's kind of not practicing what you preach, and it's kind of making a huge matter out to be trivial. Well, why don't they just rewrite it? Lord have mercy, this is Apple we're talking about here. It shouldn't take them too long. Do you have any understanding of the ecosystem and infrastructure iTunes has built over the last 10 years? Okay? They couldn't just pop out the old and pop in a new. Come on, Paul, you know better than that. Fortunately or not, he says, the changes to iTunes 10 are few, in contrast to last year's iTunes 9 release, which was accompanied by various platform updates like iTunes LP, iTunes Extras, home sharing, and so on. Well, I tend to disagree. I think they revealed just as much this year with iTunes as they did last year. New UI tweaks, a new social network. Huh? Come on. The new AirPlay? What? So don't tell me how this wasn't as big as last year's event, Paul. You're crazy. He goes on to say that will make for a shorter review, thankfully, and then I can wash my hands and move on to software that's not so despicable. Last year, Apple stole the Zune design aesthetic for its iTunes Store design. Now, I disagree with that. I disagree with that completely. iTunes has looked basically the same since it came out 10 years ago, and it predated the Zune Store. Okay? But here you're saying Apple stole the Zune design aesthetic. How did Apple steal the Zune design aesthetic when you got a picture right down here between iTunes 9 and iTunes 10, and they're hardly not any different? I don't think iTunes has stole anything off of Zune except the social networking idea. I mean, the Zune has taken everything from the iPod. Everything. If there was no iPod, there would be no fucking Zune. It's that simple. And you can't say Apple stole the Zune design aesthetic for the iTunes Store, okay, and then in the paragraph before that one, say it hasn't changed hardly any. That's what you're saying. You're saying it hasn't changed hardly any, thank God you said, since iTunes 9. And iTunes 9 isn't that far removed from the original iTunes. So how in one paragraph can you say, thank God iTunes hasn't changed that much, and in the next paragraph say Apple stole the Zune design aesthetic? I don't understand. Maybe it's my low-level IQ, but I don't see anything in the iTunes UI that really resembles the Zune marketplace at all, besides ping and the social network aspect of it. So let me go on and continue reading. And this year the changes continue, albeit mostly to the application itself. The company has futzed around with the toolbar area again, adding a new style, a new view style, and unnecessarily changing the look of only the volume slider. I like the look of the volume slider, and that's the whole deal with these little tweaks. It's polish. You polish the application with every release instead of rewriting it, Paul. Okay, there's no need to rewrite iTunes for any reason, so they just polish it every version. The new style, by the way, is called Album List, and it accompanies the previous style views, song list, grid, and cover flow. It's the new default view for content, and in keeping with the iTunes past, it's got the same awful old-fashioned DBase 3 look to it. Why Apple don't go with something more attractive and graphical by default is unclear. It's unclear to you because I think they have absolutely picked the most clutter-free and simplistic UI design so people can access, see, and sort their music quickly. I don't see anything else they could do any better or any different to make that improved. And instead of saying they need to, Paul, why don't you tell us what they can do to improve it? Instead of just complaining, how about you tell us what they do? What would you like? Okay? The navigation bar has been changed without any rhyme or reason. What? Navigation bar without any rhyme or reason? Well, I figured they just probably thought that it's time to polish it a little bit. Let's change it a little bit. You don't have to have no rhyme or reason for that. The Mac operating system or OS X-like collapsible sections are gone, replaced by a weird new hide show design. And I'm sorry, I like that. What he's talking about is, if I come over here, there's this little hide button now, and I can hide my playlist. I can come over here and show. That is a lot more clear and a lot more distinct than these little disclosure triangles. Okay? iTunes has a lot of older users, a lot of younger users, and a lot of users coming in every single day from all over the country, from all over the world. So the best thing they can do is have plain English right out beside there, instead of these little disclosure triangles up and down, all the way up and down, that clutter up my frickin' sidebar list. Okay, I look over and I see 3 or 4 little disclosure triangles, and I'm like, should I leave them little disclosure triangles open? Hey, no, fuck that. Right now, the way they changed it to, everything is nice and clean until I mouse over. When I mouse over, oh, there it is, show me. Boom, it'll show me. I can hide it. Boom, show, hide. Very simple. I like it a lot better. It's a lot more simplistic and a lot more elegant, if you ask me. So a lot of these things are a matter of opinion, Paul. And I don't like how you're preaching about how everybody feels the same way you do when I guarantee you they don't. You are a small minority, because if people didn't like it that much, they'd go to Amazon, and Amazon only holds 12% of the market. Okay, so let's see what else he has to say. Apple has also cleaned up. I mean, he's asking us, why did Apple change things? Why did Apple, polish up the volume in the navigation bar? Was iTunes too pretty before? Who knows? And Paul, ask your same thing about the little tweaks that happened in Windows 7. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? Why did they change this little thing about the start menu? Why did they change this little thing about the taskbar at the bottom? They change things for the sake of change. People get tired of seeing the same old shit, so they change things. Let's see, I haven't done a screen by screen. Oh, wait a minute, I skipped the paragraph. Apple has also cleaned up the UI at the bottom of the iTunes window. The Create Playlist, Shuffle, Repeat, and Artwork Viewer buttons no longer look like buttons. And the speakers, Start Genius and Genius sidebar buttons take up less space, but are in turn now incomprehensible. Incomprehensible. I see the Genius emblem, and I know exactly what it is. You hit this, it brings out the sidebar. Come on, Paul. How smart do you have to be to figure this kind of thing out? It's not incomprehensible. It's a lot cleaner and a lot prettier here than here. This looks so cluttered on the left, to me. And this over here looks great. And I know this over here is the new cleaned up buttons. But to me, there's just so many buttons there. It looks cluttered. Over here, this looks great. So I don't really see what they've changed much to make you come to this decision, because I think this little corner of iTunes over here has always looked cluttered. I don't think there's anything new about it. I think they have improved them, and I think they look good, and I think you're just being anal about stuff. This is just really nitpicking. He goes on to say, put simply, for a company that gets a lot of unwarranted credit for UI design, iTunes is a mess. Now, see, that I have to disagree with. iTunes is not a mess. It's beautiful. I have my music, my rentals, my music all simply laid out for me over here on the left. All I have to do, it's self-explanatory. I want to see my TV shows, I click TV shows. I want to go to the iTunes store, I click the iTunes store. Here's my iTunes store. Across the top, I got my music, movies, TV shows, app store, podcast, audiobooks. You're the one who loves the disclosure triangles, and there you go. You got a little triangle nicely tucked out of the way that brings down your subsections. What is so cumbersome and dislikable about this UI, Paul? Because it seems to me they have it set up as efficiently as possible to browse the amount of media they have on this store. I couldn't think of another way that they could do it that would make it easier. And I don't think you could either. So if you want to talk about UI designs, let's go through the web here and let's look at the MP3 albums on Amazon. Look at here. You want to talk about shitty UI design? Let's go to Amazon's website and look at Amazon MP3. Look at this. Why are these little green arrows and shit? Green arrow, down arrow, red arrow, up green arrow. All these links right here, and then the price down here, download and Berlin. What is all this shit? You want to talk about a confusing fucking UI to buy music? This is a confusing fucking UI, Paul. This is horrid. This is horrid. This is horrendous. I wouldn't even begin to know where to find my goddamn music on Amazon if I wanted to. I have no idea. Where is the top charts? Here they are. MP3 downloads, MP3 albums, updated hourly. Bestsellers, okay? These are bestsellers. It's just so, it's so fucked up. It's not as clean, pretty, or as elegant as the iTunes UI. So, if you hate the iTunes UI so much, come to this wonderfully laid out system that Amazon's got here. And I think you'll change your mind pretty quick. Oh, and they finally changed the iTunes icon. In Apple land, this is considered big news. And you know what? I like the new icon. The old icon had a CD on it. It was round. So they got rid of the CD, but they still kept that same familiar round icon to where at a glance it still looks like that CD's on the icon. It's still familiar to the look. Still round, just like the CD was round. You glance at it, you know it's iTunes. I understand why they've done it. I like it. I think it's beautiful. I'm not going to get into Ping, okay? Ping is worth a totally separate video. I wanted to go over his problems with iTunes. Ping is worth a totally separate video. I think that's a great, great thing, and we'll get into that. So let's go on to his final thoughts. In all the well-deserved negativity here, I should mention one important side note. iTunes wouldn't even be worth discussing if it weren't for two other factors. First, the aforementioned family of iDevices, iPods, iPhones, and iPods, most of which are quite excellent, good enough to make many of us put up with iTunes. And second, of course, is the iTunes Store. Sure, it may look horrible, which I disagree, but the iTunes Store is by far the biggest and best stocked of any digital content market on earth, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. My comments above are directed purely at the latest version of Apple's terrible PC software. And my solution for you is to get a Mac. Because maybe iTunes is just horrendous on Windows. I don't know. But no matter how bad it is on Windows, the UI is the same across Mac or Windows. And I love the UI. I think it's efficient. I love it. Now, if you don't like iTunes, what's your gripe? Let's go to, how about Double Twist? You've heard of Double Twist. I know you have. Right here's Double Twist. Look, they have the Android market, guys. You can access the Android marketplace from inside an application, just like you can access the iTunes App Store from within iTunes. You can access the Android app market from within Double Twist. Not only can you access the Android market from within Double Twist, you can access a podcast market, and you can access the Amazon MP3 music store. As you can see, you sign in with your Amazon account, and whatever credit card you use to buy stuff on Amazon, you click buy for 99 cents, and boom, you bought it. It downloads it to your thing, and look, this works. This works just like iTunes, as you can see. You can change the view however you want to do it, but as you can see, it's not showing me any artwork, and there's a few little caveats to that, and I don't like this up here, but I'm sure there's a way to turn all this off. But as you can see, this is very iTunes-esque. Oh, there comes the artwork right there. But as you can see, it's got an artwork for every single song, every single separate song, and I don't like that. iTunes, on the other hand, has, for the most part, except for, on some occasions, has one album and all the songs under that one album art. Instead, this is giving me a separate piece of album art for every single song. So don't talk to me about how the iTunes UI is horrible. There is no other UI on the planet that even comes close to being as efficient and as easy to use as iTunes. Not Amazon through the web, and not Amazon through Double Twist. So let's go back to our other view here. We'll close the browser. Now you can see we have our standard list view. Okay, so now you've got all your music. You can add playlists. You can even access your external hard drives. Can you see that? You can sync your music. Tells you how much is free. This is a dream come true for people who don't want to use the iDevice or don't want to use the iTunes Store. Okay, if you have a Droid and you hate everything about iTunes, this is the place for you. You can access the Android market, and you can buy your MP3s from Amazon. You can totally bypass the Apple ecosystem altogether. So, Paul, if iTunes is so fucking bad, you have viable alternatives. But if you won't choose to go and switch to these viable alternatives, I can't feel sorry for you. You can talk about the iTunes this, iTunes UI, but these are the best alternatives that I could find. Double Twist and Amazon, and they're just they're just as shitty as you say iTunes is. So go to Double Twist, get you an Android phone, buy your Android apps right through Double Twist, buy your MP3s right through Amazon and Double Twist, and you shouldn't have to deal with Apple altogether. So why are you even fucking complaining? Because you can. Sorry, Paul, not buying it this time. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time when I tear him down about ping. Later, guys. OS 10.